Okay, so today we are going to be looking at understanding the scope of computer programs, computer code. So we've been going through the foundation of computer programs, and the scope is one of the technical terms that we have to understand. When I say, oh, look at the scope of the code, your ability to understand what that means is very, very crucial because it's something that you're going to be using a lot over and over again. The scope of a variable, the scope of a function. Just the scope. It doesn't matter the language that you're looking at. There is always the concept of scope in any language that you write, okay? So what is the meaning of a scope? So in coding, we have variables, that store data. And once you create a variable, then you think of the scope of the variable. So the scope of the variable is talking about the places in the code where you can have access to that variable. So if you declare a variable over here, will you be able to access the variable inside a function or not? Or will you be able to access this variable outside a function or not? So that is what the scope of the variable is. So the places in the code where you can be able to access the variable, they call that the scope of the variable. That is the scope of the variable. The places in the code where you won't be able to access the variable, we say that is out of scope. That is not the scope of the variable. It's not within the scope of the variable. And once you have a firm understanding of this, then when you are writing code, it will make your life very, very easy. And if you're looking at somebody else's code, it is easier for you to understand it. You have to look at the scope of variables when you see them. And sometimes it's not just the variable. There is a scope of a function. Depending on the place where you declare a function or you define a function, you may not be able to access that function in different parts of the code. So functions also have a scope. Variables, they have a scope. And to make it very easy for you to understand, pretty much in every language, there are three important scopes that we have to understand. So there is something called block scope, a block of code. And there is something called function scope, function. Anytime you declare a function, you are creating a scope. You are creating a local scope. And I'm gonna explain to you what that means. And we have to also demonstrate all of this. Then we have the global. So global scope, you can see the name global. It means that any variable or function that you define within the global scope, you can access it anywhere in the code, right? So of course, this is a variable. If you define it in the global scope, then anywhere in the code, you can access it. If I say access a variable, what do you think that means? To be able to access a variable, what does it mean to you?
You're able to find it again or take it.
You're able to find it or take it.
Or use it again.
Use it again. You're able to use the variable. You want to modify, you can also think about modification, right? If you have a variable, you can modify the content of the variable, right? If I say the content, I'm talking about the value that the variable stores, right? Right here, you have this variable, it stores the number 10. You can change it to store anything else, say the number 5 or 6, depending on the logic of the code, right? So accessibility is being able to, use the variable or change it or whatever you want to do with it. Okay, so let's demonstrate what I mean. So just know that there are three scopes out there: global, local. I don't want to call it local. I want to call it function scope. And then there is a block scope. And a block of code anytime you have these curly brackets, you are creating a block of code. So once you have a block like this, you are creating a different scope. And so if you declare a variable over here, the variable is going to be constrained by the block. It's only going to be accessible within the block that is surrounding it. Okay. And then if you create a function, then you are creating a scope. It's like you're creating a wall. That's the way you should think about it. These scopes are like a wall. You create a wall within the rooms, right? So if you have a bedroom, there are walls around it. So within this wall, you won't be able to see behind it. You cannot see through the wall. So whatever you put in here is kind of hidden from the outside of the function. That's what it means. So, but if you put something in the global scope, then that is available to everybody. It's a little crazy. Like the global scope is everywhere in the code. So let me just demonstrate this concept right now in the code. So this is the folder that we've been working from. We just demonstrate some of the codes, and I'm going to create a file for today's class. So we're going to call it day4.html. So we are doing JavaScript, but JavaScript mostly works with the HTML. That's why we are creating an HTML file, and then we're going to put our JavaScript code in here. So like if you start watching the video from the beginning, you're going to understand all of these concepts. So we just created this boilerplate. I'm going to save it. And I'm going to put our JavaScript in here. Just type a script and then hit tab. Okay, so we're going to put our JavaScript code here within this. Okay, so I'm going to paste the code that I just copied from the site. We're just going to go through it and experiment with it. So let's go through this code and see what it is doing. What are we doing here?
So we're using a global variable?
We are creating a variable called what? Global variable. You can change this name. The name of a variable is completely up to you. And you want to make sure the name of the variable makes sense, right? It makes sense. It gives you an idea of what kind of data you have in there. Okay, so what are we doing here? We are just creating a function, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about functions, okay, but I think we're going to look at it again. Once we get to functions again in JavaScript, we're going to go very, very deep and make sure that you guys have a very firm understanding, But as far as coding is concerned, like, you don't have a lot of things that you should remember, You can see you have to think of statement, expression, all of these concepts. Once you know these concepts, then any code that you see, you would be able to at least understand what is going on, So it's not like there are many jargons that you need to know, like a whole lot of things that you need to know. So there's a function. So we create a function over here, and a function can do anything you want. Over here, we are just printing global variable. We are printing whatever data is stored in the variable called what? Global variable. So what are we doing here? This is a tough question. We created a function over here. What are we doing over here? We are calling the function. So is this the first time you're hearing this word, to call a function?
No.
Okay, so if you create a function like this, the function is not going to do anything. The only way to get a function to do something is by calling the function. And we said that you can call it as many times as you want. That is the advantages of having a function. You can call it as many times as you want. Assuming this function is doing a lot of things, all you have to do is to just call the name of the function like this. And then it's going to execute whatever that it is supposed to do. So always you have to call the function. You need to call it. Otherwise, it's not gonna work. Okay. So yeah, that's one thing. So we are calling the function one time over here. So once I call it, then the computer code will go into the function, and then whatever we tell it to do is going to do. So now over here, I'm just printing the value of global variable. So this code is saying that because this is a global variable. Now, understand the global scope right now. So once you create your tag like this and you start writing your code over here, we just keep writing code. So this is the global. I know this is the global variable because we have not created any block like this. And we have not created any function. The moment you declare a function like this, you are creating a new scope. But until you do any of this one, you are still within the global scope, So right now within the global scope, there are so many variables that are available to us. You guys don't even see them, but you're going to see them later on as we go down. There is something called document. Document is a global variable. It's given to you. You don't create it. Like within the browser environment, you have this document object available to you. Because it is an object, it has a lot of methods. So you can just say document.write. And once you do this, you can just write anything. Hello world. This is the way you use this global object that is available to you. And because it is global, you can use it anywhere within your code. Even I can call this document.write within the function here, and it's going to work because it is globally available to everywhere in the code. But what does document.write does? This one is going to just write something on the page for you. I'm sure it's going to put this within a paragraph tag and just write it on the page. So if you go to any website, this whole page, we call it is a document. So if you want to do something on the page, the way you do it is to do it through the document object that has been given to you. So a lot of code has already been written for us. That's the thing. We just have to understand and know how to use them. And we are going to know all of that as we keep going. All I'm trying to say is that this document object, we didn't define it anywhere, but we are using it. It is globally available to us in the browser environment, right? Okay, so because anything we are doing here is global, we can be able to access it within a function, and we can be able to access it within any statement, any if statement. So you can say, let me just use a while loop here. While true. So you can see that this is what we call the block scope. This one here, block. It is a block because this is not a function. Is this a function?
No.
It's not a function, right? But it's just a code that you are writing, and suddenly you have this curly brackets here. So if you do anything in here, I'm just creating a variable, say day of the week. What today is what? Saturday. This one. If I create this over here, Now the question is, will I be able to access this variable outside of this block? That is the question. That is all that we are trying to do. But I'm going to show you something very soon. This is a very, very important concept, okay? So I'm just spending time on it because when you are writing software, there are millions of lines of code that has already been written. So many lines of code. But you have to read through the code and make sure you understand it. So the code is going to be grouped into functions and it's going to be grouped into blocks like this. And then you're going to see a bunch of variables in there. Your ability to know that this variable, I can use it within this function or I can use it within this block. It is very, very important. Very, very important. Okay. Okay. So within this block, let me try to print global variable and see if that's going to work. So I'll just say console.log. Then I'll put global variable here. So how many times are we printing global variable? We are printing it within this function. And then we are printing it within this block of code. And then we are also printing it globally. So let's see how many things we are going to see in the console, okay? So if this code is working, you're going to see 10 printed in the console, right? You're going to see it printed how many times? 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So this while loop, you know that is going to execute as long as this condition is true, right? So actually, because this is always going to be true, the code is going to get stuck over here and it's going to keep printing this value. It's going to keep printing it indefinitely. Okay, so this is what we call infinite loop. It's an infinite loop, okay? So, I mean, this is a bad code to write, but it's okay. So essentially, it's just going to get stuck over here and keep printing this variable. But we are not controlling the condition. So, but let me demonstrate what I mean. So to be able to execute this code, I mean, once you watch the previous videos, you're going to get a hang of all this pretty easily. So let me just execute the code. If you have any question at all, you have to ask it. Don't be scared. I work as a software engineer, so I'm not scared to answer questions about programming. Okay, so this page is slowing down due to Firefox stuff. So Firefox issues here. But, oh, yeah. So I know why it is slowing down, because there is an infinite loop happening. It's just actively printing this. See, we just have to stop it. So there's an infinite loop. But let me see if it won't even let me go to the back, right? It won't let me go into the console because there's an infinite loop. You don't want to have an infinite loop because you know what this does, right? The computer is very, very fast. So if you create an infinite loop within a twinkle of an eye, it's going to print like millions of this. And so that is consuming resources from your computer, from the memory of the computer. So let me I'm gonna try to, I mean, it's not a problem of Firefox. I was thinking about using a different browser, but so let me just control this, okay? We cannot just have an infinite loop like that. So just say, let's create a variable, say count, and set it to 0. And then we can say while count is less than 5. And then over here, we want to increase the value of count, value of count. Count equals, I want to do it the traditional way, count plus 1, but this is more readable for me. The shortcut could have been count plus, right? Okay. So Justina, do you understand what this code will do?
Now the way.
Could you attempt to explain this one? Just attempt it, and then where you make a mistake, I will try to help you. Don't forget that we learned something about loops, right? A loop.
Mm-hmm.
And what did we use loops for? What is the use?
To repeat, like if you have to do something multiple times.
Perfect. Yes. If you have to do something over and over again, then you think of a loop. And then we looked at different types of loops, right? The for loop is there.
Mm-hmm.
The while loop is one of the loops that we saw. So again, you just have to think of the syntax of the loop, of the type of loop. So the syntax is how you use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you see, I'm just using a while loop. I'm just doing something over and over again, as long as some condition is not false.
Okay.
So right? I'm listening. Sorry.
So
you can attempt to explain this, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So basically, okay, so it's supposed to be as long as it's less than 5.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking for the day of the week. So if it's the variable is the day of the week. So if it is not 5, if it's not like, if it's over 5, then you would put Saturday.
I'm so happy that I was able to confuse you. So I have one question. What do you think this line of code is? What is this? If you see these two forward slashes in front of a statement like this, what does it mean? I'm sorry, please.
Variable?
No, because of this forward slash over here. See, I have forward slash over here too. And you see the color is changing because I have that, you see? So in programming, we call this what? Happy?
Commenting out.
It's comment. So it changes the whole statement into a comment. See, if I remove this, then it's a code. You see the computer the color has also changed. But the moment you put 2 slashes here, you are turning that into a comment. And what are comments in code? Comments means that the program should ignore that statement. It's only there for you, your own documentation, your own note taking, so that tomorrow, if you come back, you can understand what the code is doing. So this one here, you have to act as if it's not there, because it's just a comment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I know I'm happy it's confusing you, but it's okay, just ignore it, because that's the way the computer would do to it.
Mm-hmm.
So in this code, I'm actually doing only one thing. I'm just printing the content of what?
Global variable.
And the global variable, I didn't define it in here, so I know that's also confusing. If I had defined it in here, then it would be easier for you. I have already defined it out here. It's within the global scope. Because it's within the global scope, I can access it anywhere in the code. So that's the point I'm trying to demonstrate. So you can try to now tell me what you think this is doing. It's just a loop. Think of it in terms of loops. And then let's see the output. What output you are even expecting in the first place. You don't need to know anything else. Just don't be scared. Don't think too much. Just look at the code and explain what you think it's doing, right? Yeah.
You said to ignore day of the week?
Yes, you have to ignore it because it's a comment. So again, comment is a key term. It's a technical term that we use in code. You always write in comments in your code. If I show you a code of software, there will be so many comments in there. It's just there to give you information. The computer is going to ignore it. So you may not even read it. It's okay for me. Right?
So you're asking what is the output?
Yeah, what do you think the output of this would be?
Hello world.
This will be hello world.
Oh no, global variable.
Exactly, right? So
Oh, sorry, looking up.
yeah, go ahead, please. Sorry.
No, what were you about to say?
No, that's all right. You tell me, what do you think the global variable has? What data is in here? Look at the code. So this is how it is. You look first, you have to look here. Do you see the global variable here? No. So you have to go outside this scope and then look outside the room and see if it is there. So you have to check the global scope. You don't look inside the function, because even if it's in the function, you cannot use it here. The only way you can use it here is if it's within the global scope. So now you found it up here. And so what is inside it?
What is inside the global variable?
Yeah.
10.
10. That's the data that you have in there, right? Remember, variables have to store data. That's the only reason for having them. So don't let the name of the variable confuse you. Okay, it's just a name. I could have called it anything. But the purpose is to store data. So the question is, what data is it? It's 10. And it's not even enough for you to say 10. You have to say the number 10. The number 10. This is very precise and it's very important, because it could store a string 10, a string of 10. So this is also 10, but it's not a number 10. It's a string 10. So you want to always be mindful of the data that you are storing, okay? The type of data, the type of data. Okay, so now what do you think this code is going to, what is this alone going to do? Let's put it out here. Don't worry, we'll do it slowly. Let's put this out here. If I have this console.log global variable, the code will go into the variable and print whatever that is there, right? It's going to print 10 in the console. So what if I want to print 10 again? So you can see now I'm doing the same thing twice. So I can just write this. What if I want to do it again? I want to print it one more time.
Loop.
What if another time? If I want to print it again, I still have to write it. So then in software, there is something called the dry principle. Dry principle. The code has to be dried. You don't want to repeat yourself like this, because you are writing the same code many times. So because you're doing this over and over again, what comes into your mind? You know you can use a loop to do it, so that you just simplify your code. So this is exactly what this loop is doing. This loop is going to do all of this at one time for you. I know we are not learning about loops, but I still want to repeat it because this is important. So then we are using the while loop, and you pick one of the loops. You have a choice. If you check here, we have all the loops that are available. You can see them here. Just pick any one of them. Know the syntax. So how many times do you want to print this? You want to print it 5 times. So you just create a variable and put the number 0 in there and say, oh, if the value of this variable is not 5, then keep doing this. So keep doing what? This is what you are doing. And then after you do this, I want you to increase the value that is stored in this variable, increase it by 1. So like this last term is very important. This is very important. If you don't have this line of code, then this code is going to go on forever, because count has the value of 0 and it's always going to have the value of 0. So this condition is always going to be true. As long as this condition, this expression evaluates to true, this code will keep repeating. So what you have to do in a while loop is that make sure you are changing your control variable. You can call this one control variable. But this is what determines how many times this loop will execute. So when you get here, the value is 0. You do what you want to do. Now add 1 to it. It's no longer 0, it's going to be 1. Now the loop will come again. You add another 1 to it. So this is going to become 2, 3, 4. As soon as it becomes 5, then 5, is 5 less than 5? No. So this condition is going to become false, and then this will not execute again. And then it will continue to the next line of code that you have. If you have no code over here, nothing is going to happen. But if you have any code here, then it will continue to work. Okay. So let's see what this does. It's just the loop. What is happening? So the document.write is writing the first hello world over here. And then this function, when we call the function, it's also going to write hello world again. So that's why you have hello world twice. It's because of this line of code. But the other things, you have to look into the console to see it. So go to inspect, console, and then look at how many times the 10 has been printed over there. So in order not to confuse, keep going on and on, let me just stick to the concept of the scope and make sure that we understand it very well. So we created a variable globally, and within the function, we've been able to print. How do you even know that we are printing this from the function? So let me just add some kind of text for us to know that this is printed from the function. So I'll say printed from the function. So I'm just adding some text over here. And then let me also do something similar to here. And I'm saying printed from the block. I'll just say block. I don't have to write all of that. Block, just a block is fine. So we're gonna see when this is called, there will be block here. And when this is called, we're gonna see. Let's just make it function. Function. You can write anything that makes sense, to you. If I just refresh over here, you can see the block came first. You see all of this are these. How many times did I repeat myself here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So every time I repeated myself, it has that. And then now this code, count. Something may be wrong over here because it's actually printed 1 time. See, the block, this was called 1 time, but it should be called about 5 times. So let's see what the problem is. So count, the variable names are correct over here. So why is this printing 1 time? That is a bug. It's a bug that we need to look into. So this loop is not working properly. While 0 is less than 5, do this and increase this value. Is there any spelling mistake here? Okay, let me just end this with a semicolon. I know that's not the reason, but yeah, this is a little interesting because I don't think there is any mistake in the spelling of that. So why is this loop not happening? Okay. So while count is less than 5, keep doing this and increase the value of count by 1. Then come back. Let me do it this way and see. Maybe every language is slightly different, so I'm not sure. So that was not the reason. Okay, let's This is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Let me just do this. Changing the syntax a little bit. That also didn't trigger that. Very interesting. This is a little surprising because I'm expecting the block. Oh, yeah. See, it's already repeating itself, but they don't want to just, can you see 5 times? They don't want to just keep printing this 5 times over here. So they are putting the 5 here. It's crazy. Why are they doing that? It's just confusing, you know? Because I'm expecting 5 of this and I'm just seeing 1, but you have to look at the number here, saying this has been repeated 5 times. It's a stupid, so it doesn't matter. Any of the code that we've written would work. This is working. You know, there's just different ways of writing code. So, let me save this. It's not saved.
So what would it look like if you didn't put the count?
Or if I didn't put a count, the code is gonna crash. You know why? It's gonna crash because this loop will keep printing forever.
Okay.
Right, because it's an infinite loop. Okay, so again, this is not about loops. This is about scopes, understanding the scopes. So the point I want to make is that you can see I have this variable declared over here, but I'm able to access it here, and I'm able to access it here. Okay, let's close this. I mean, if I really want to make sure you guys are remembering some of the things we've done, I could ask you to trace this code to the output. Like when you are watching this, make sure that you can understand the output, why we have it like this, okay? Just make sure that, very important. Okay, so let me remove this because this is just crazy. We don't want that. We already have the loop for that. The loop is doing that, so save it, refresh that. So we have this repeating 5 times. Okay, now I'm going to move this thing. Well, why don't I just create a different variable? So I'm going to create a different variable within the function. Say var test equals. Yes. So this is a new variable and it's written in a function. So what is the scope of this variable? This variable. That is the function. The scope is the function. The scope is the function. So if I try to print it here outside the function, it's not supposed to work. It's not supposed to work. So let's try that. So I'm just thinking a lot because this is becoming confusing a little bit. I want to make sure you guys are not seeing too many things here. So let me comment all this out. So what am I doing? I'm turning this into a comment. So it's not going to fire at all. But of course, this function, let me try to print the variable outside the function. So I'm gonna print the value of test. This is not supposed to work. It's not supposed to work. And let's demonstrate. We can just refresh this screen over here. And there is a problem. You see, test is not defined. So the variable test is not defined. You are trying to access a variable that is not defined, right? Okay, so let me print it inside the function itself. And you're gonna see that it's going to work. Because within the function, it has access to this variable. Of course, if I execute this code, is anything going to happen? I mean, for the function, nothing is going to happen because I'm not calling the function. See, if you refresh, there is nothing happening in here because this function is not being called. You always have to call the function if you want the function to execute. So I'm calling it here. And it doesn't matter, you can even call it up here and it's still going to work. So let's refresh the screen, and now there is no problem. It's able to print the value of yes for us, right? So that is what we call the scope, the function scope. This is the function scope. So within a function, any variable that you define in there is only going to be accessible within the function itself. You get a point? You cannot access it outside. But if you define it globally, you can access it anywhere. We tested the global definition. So now let's test out this the block. The last piece of the puzzle is the block scope. So this is the other type of scope, the block. Let me see. I don't care. I like the repetition because I believe it helps to reinforce the point. Okay. So now the block, I'm going to demonstrate the block. Let's declare a variable here. So in JavaScript, if you want to declare a variable, var is one way of doing it, but there are two other ways, which is the most recommended way, let and then const. This is the ones that we want you to use in JavaScript. And I'm going to show you the reason, okay? Right now, if I declare this variable, days of the week, or day of the week, if I declare this variable within this block over here, within the block, and I try to print it outside the block, if I try to print it outside the block, so console.log, and let me print the, oh gosh, see the computer is a little, so let me copy this and paste it here, console.log. If I try to print this here, what do you think is going to happen? Because this is a block, it's a scope, right? And this variable is only available within the scope. It shouldn't be accessible out here, but it's going to be accessible, and I'll show you why. So let's just do this. I'm going to add some text over here so that I know which line of code I'm on. So this is outside. I'll just add outside here. Save. Now let's refresh that. See, outside, and it's printing Saturday. It's printing Saturday. It's printing Saturday. So it is not supposed to print it, but it is printing it. And it's because of this var keyword. This var keyword is very deadly because of this problem. Like if I define a variable within a block, there is no way you should be able to access it outside the block. Because of that, they say don't use the var. Always use the let and the const. So let me show you. If I just use let over here, let. If I use let, I'm doing the same thing, just declaring a variable. Now, if I execute this code, there should be an error. You see, day of the week is not defined. It's not defined. In other words, you cannot access day of the week outside the block. So we are saying that the let is block scoped. Let is block scoped, but var is not block scoped. So because of that, it's very deadly. You don't want to be changing something that at a place where you're not supposed to change it. You don't want to be accessing something at a place in the code where you are not allowed to access it. Okay. Of course, if we use a const also, const is also gonna work perfectly. You won't be able to access it. The same. Okay. So do you guys understand the scope now?
Yes.
So how many scopes do we have? 3, right? Global, a block scope, and then a function scope, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you see a block, think that you are creating a wall. So whatever you do inside it, you cannot access it outside it. That's the whole point. If you are creating a function, you are within a new wall that you've created. Whatever you do in here, you cannot access it outside here. The only way you can access it, you just have to call the function. That's all. That's all you can do. Okay. So always remember the global scope. If you want something to be available everywhere in the code, you have to put it in the global scope. Put it here, and then you have no problem, right? And if you are creating a global variable, you have to be very careful because it is global, you can change the content of that variable in many different places in the code. So you want to make sure that somebody is not changing it when they are not supposed to change it. Because if right now, let me demonstrate over here. See, the way the code is working is it's always going to start from the top and go down like that, right? So at this line, the value is 11. In this while loop, let me set it to, let me change the value of global variable to count. I like to trick you guys. I'm setting the value to count. So what am I saying? Whatever the value of count is, assign it to this variable. Now over here, if I'm actually printing the value of global variable, what do you think is gonna come here? What do you think is gonna come in here? I'll wait for you guys to answer it. It's supposed to be, I don't think it's a hard question. At this line of code, if I print global variable, what value is gonna be in there? What data is gonna be in there?
It's going to be variable, the global variable. That's what's going to come.
The 10, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if that's the case. Now let's refresh that. Look at outside. What value came? 4. This is outside. The value that came is what? 4. Why is it not 10? Now this is the tough question. So the 10 didn't come. It was 10, but now it's no longer 10. It's what? 4. Why is that? You can see that I'm changing it over here, right? Because if you create a variable and you put something there, if you go to the next line and say, you put something else in there. So what is there is no longer 10, but what? But 7.
So it replaces it
It has to replace it.
with a new line.
Yeah, it has to replace it. That's the way the computer works. It has to put a new value there. So now, why didn't I put var over here? And I'm just assigning the value. Why didn't I put var here?
You already declared it in
Good, thank
line
you.
11.
Yes, because I already declared it. So you don't declare it again. There will be a problem if you do that. This code will error out. Okay. So yeah. So as you keep going, you're changing it. So here now, if I print, it's still gonna come as 4, not 7. And the question is why 4? Why is it coming as 4? And right now you can see this is actually printing 1 by 1. It's kind of funny. At first, it wasn't doing that. It would just put the count. Oh, so now the values are different. That's why. Oh my God. Hey. So that's the thing about coding. See, let me remove this line of code. A lot is happening, but your ability to see what is happening, guys. That's the coding. Because if you don't see it, you can't change it. Majority of your work is gonna be changing code that has already been written. If you don't understand the code, you cannot change it. So understanding the code, I believe, is 80% of the work. You know, rare cases, you're going to have to write code from scratch. So let me comment this out. If I comment this out and I'm printing the value of global variable, you see the value is going to be constant, right? It's whatever value we put in here, that is what I'm going to keep printing. So this line of code is going to print the same thing, because the value is constant. Do you guys understand that? So now let's see. If I execute, it's just this line of code, block 7, but the value is 7. And let me put one space here also to make it more visible. The value is 7, and it doesn't change. It's always 7. So the code is putting 5 over here. It's saying that I'm printing this 5 times. It's because it's JavaScript, okay? In other programming languages, I think it will still repeat it down there, okay? Or even the browser also is this. If I'm using Google Chrome, maybe it will print all of it. I think this is crazy. Let me use a different browser. Second, view. Let's try to use a different browser. Could be crazy to find this. Start debugging. Let me see something. So I have Chrome over here. Let me use Chrome. Okay, so I'm using Google Chrome right now. I'm not using the other one. Let's see the way it will print the values. Go to the console. Oh, so it's doing the same thing. It's putting 5 next to it. I wanted it to just print this 5 times, but okay. So it's all right. Let's just use whatever. So it's still Chrome. Now we are going back to the Firefox. Okay, so 5 is right there. Okay. So guys, you can see the point I want to make is that right now we are not changing this, but as soon as I bring this code back, now the value of global variable is not constant anymore. It keeps changing, because you can see when the code gets to this line for the first time, the value of count is going to be 0. And then it's going to assign 0 to global variable. So if you print global variable, you're going to print 0. And then here you increase the value of count. So the loop will go back up. Now the value of count is not 0 anymore. It's 1 because you added 1 to it. So this line of code, I hope you all understand it. It means go into the variable count, whatever value is there, add 1 to it, and then whatever you get, assign that back to the count variable. We went through this in the past, so maybe. So now once it gets back, this has increased. So this keeps increasing until count is equal to 5, and then it will not execute again. But so the last time the value of global variable was changed, the count was 4. So then once you come over here, that is what you're going to have. You're going to have 4 stored over there. So now you can see, because it's not constant, it keeps changing. So every time you come, you are printing something different. So, and then once you come out, you have that. Do you guys understand what I said? Do you understand why the value of global variable over here is 4 and not 7?
Yep, I understand that part.
Can you explain it, please? Just tell me how you understand it. Maybe that would help. How do you understand that? Articulate what you think is good. By speaking, I believe that you are also reinforcing these ideas. So
So we started with 7, which is line 13.
no, we started with 10.
Oh, 10, but then we changed it to
7.
7.
Okay.
And then when we go into the while loop, it says that if it's starts off with the count of 0,
Mm-hmm.
and it should stop when it gets to 5.
Mm-hmm.
So it would print starting at 0,
Mm-hmm.
and it would do it over again throughout the block
Mm-hmm.
until it gets to 4.
Okay. Until it gets to 4, and then this condition will fail.
Yeah.
No, until the count becomes 5, and then this will fail. So it will not get here to assign the 5, right?
Right.
Yeah. Perfect. Does it make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now one last question. Look, I'm moving this from here. Thank you. I'm moving that from there, and I'm gonna put it at the last line. Can somebody tell me what is going to be the value of global count now? And even if I print it, what do you think is gonna print here? What numbers are we gonna see from here to here? What do you think this will be? And what do you think this will be? And that. I want you guys to think very deeply before answering this. Because it was up here, I moved it down here. And just by doing that, you're changing things, right? That's the code. Programming, you write something very small and it's having a lot of impact on the code and the output of the code. So everything you do depends on what you are expecting and what you want at the end of the day. So what do you think will be the value of global variable once we come out of the loop? And then also tell me this line of code here, this one, what will be the output? The block is always going to be fixed, but what is changing is the global variable. What would be the first value? And then what would be the last value?
Would it be, would it start at 4?
Why will it start at 4?
Just the educated guess.
No, always just start reading the code from the top down, and then you will know what it will be. Just always start reading from the top down, because that's what the computer will do, right? It will start reading from the top down. Should I help? Let's go through it. Once we get here, what is the value of this? It's going to be
10.
Okay, now when we get here, what is the value now?
7.
7. Okay, this one is just doing its own thing. We don't care. It's not changing our variable.
Mhm.
So now here, count is equal to 0. Fine, this loop is going to check. Is count less than 5 true? It's true. So then it will start executing this. It's going to create a variable called day of the week and assign, set a date to it, even though it's not going to do anything with it, right? Because we created a variable. Are we doing anything with it? Nothing. No problem. Now, this is what we care about, this line of code. You are saying block, and then you're saying print the value of this. What is the value of global variable now at this point? It's still 7.
So, okay.
It's still 7.
Oh, so it's not going to print because it has to be less than 5.
No, you're making a mistake. You're making a big mistake right now, based on what you said.
Oh, no, sorry, because the count starts at 0, right?
So the printing, is it based on the value that the loop, this loop, for this loop to execute, is it based on the value of global variable or the value of count? For this loop to execute, what is the condition? The condition is what? Count has to be less than 5. So this statement, has it got anything to do with the global variable? No. No. This variable count has nothing to do with this variable. Has it got anything to do with it? No. So remember that coding is all about data. You are working with data. So you create a variable and you put your data there. And you have to keep changing the data intelligently so that you get what you want. So all that we are saying is that, oh, let me create a variable and put 0 there. Now for this loop, the first time I come, I'm checking if count is less than 5, which is going to be true. Then I'm going to do this and see what I'm doing. I'm now changing the value of count to 1. It's no longer 0 once I get here. And then when it gets here, it's going to check again. Count, what is the value of count? It's going to be 1. It's 1 less than 5, true. Then it will do this again. And then you also you increase it one more time. It goes to 2, increase 3, increase 4. If 4 less than 5, true. So it will still come here. Now, once you increase it to 5, you come back here. Is 5 less than 5? No. So it will skip the whole thing. That is all that the count is doing. Your count is just intelligently controlling how many times this loop executes. That is all that it is doing. Okay. So now global variable is another variable somewhere that also has its own thing happening. We put 10 there. Now we say put 7. And then now in this loop, we are changing it. We are saying whatever the value of count is, just assign it there. And then over here, we are also printing what it is. That's what we are doing with it, right? And again, depending on what you want to do in the software, this is exactly what you may have to write to get that behavior. Computer is going to do exactly what you tell it to do. Exactly what you tell it to do. So you want to be very mindful of what you are doing. And of course, we did look at some practical problems, and those practical problems forced us to think in a certain way, right? So you probably understand what I'm saying, right? The way you write the code is very important. This is not English, it's computer code, right? And you're just manipulating data. So now you started with 10, 7. Once you get here, you haven't changed the 7, right? So it's gonna still be 7. And then the code will go here. It's gonna increase the value of count. So the first time count is 0. Now once you increase it, count is what? 1. And then you are saying whatever the value of count is, put it into global variable. So this operation, what variable are we changing? We are changing the content of this variable. We are not changing the content of count. This is just whatever count is. If it is 5, put 5 in here. If it is 6, put 6 in here. You see what is happening? Have I confused you guys? Afi, are you confused right now, Afi?
Can you repeat the last part?
Okay. Tina, did you understand what I said? I think I'm
Okay, so hello?
Yeah, Tina, what did you say?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just explanation of how counts, it has to be, it's all dependent on the count.
It's so dependent on the count. Yeah, for this loop to execute, it all depends on the count.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so that's very powerful. So let's start again from the top. I just want us to know what the output should be. It's very important to know that. So now we start from here. Global variable is what? 10. What we are doing, we call it tracing. You're tracing the code. You're tracing the code to understand what value could be in what variable, something like that. So just pick one variable and trace the variable. Trace it and see the stages that the variable goes through, right? The different values that will be stored in it and removed, blah, blah, blah. So we start from here, it's 10. We put 7 there. It's no longer 10, it's 7. Now, once we get here, count is 0. So this is true. It's gonna come here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it will create a variable. Don't worry because it's not going to do anything with it. No one cares. Goes to the next line. You are printing global variable. What is here? You haven't come here yet. You are still here. So the code goes line by line. Don't forget that strictly. Once you are here, you don't even know what is here yet. You don't know. You are just here. So what is the value here? 7. So this is going to be 7. And then you are incrementing your count. So count is 1. You assign 1 to this. So now what is the value of global variable at this point? It's 1.
Where you get count is 1.
So in this statement here, when we got here, count was 0, right?
0. Oh, okay.
+1, yeah.
Plus
Mhm.
1. And so you get count is 1 now, and you are assigning 1 to this variable. So now global variable is 1.
Mhm.
You see the way I wrote the 1, I made it a comment. So it's not going to distract anything. So now we go back to the top of the loop. Over here, the condition will check. What is the value of count here? It's 1. Is 1 less than 5? Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
So this is true. So it will come here. Now it will create this variable again, even though it's not going to use it. Then it will go to this place and it's printing the value of global variable. What is the value of global variable here?
1.
It's still 1. Yes. So this will become 1. And then it will increase the count. Now count is 2, right?
Right.
You are assigning 2 to the global variable. So this is now 2. So it comes up here. It will check 2 less than 5. That's true. So it will come here and then do the same process. This is now 2. So it's going to print 2 for it. And then now let's see how it ends. It will increase count to 3 and then assign 3 to global variable. But we come here, 3 less than 5 is true. So it will keep happening. It's going to print the global variable, which is 3. Increase this to 4. You assign 4 to global variable, 4. So now you come here. It's 4 less than 5. That is true. That is true. So you still come here, you print this. This is going to be 4, the number 4. Then you increase count by 1. So count is 5. You now assign 5 to global variable. Now you come up here. Is 5 less than 5? No. So this will not execute. Once you are coming out of this, what is the value of global variable? It's 5.
4.
It's 5.
So the difference.
Mhm.
So the difference is instead of printing block 0, it's just not going to print block 0. It's just going to start off with block 1. If you move the global variable down.
Okay, so that's not the difference. You know why? It's going to start with 7, not even 1. When we trace the code, remember the first time you get here,
Okay.
it's 7. So this will
So
be
it's gonna be 7, 1, 2,
up to
3,
4,
4.
up to 4. And then
Okay.
here it will not be 4 anymore. This will be 5. Because once you came out of it, it was 5. Global variable is 5. Why don't I show you the output? It's very different from this output. You can see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all I did was I just moved one line of code to a different place. So you can see 7, everything that we just said. Right? And if this one is confusing you, it's okay, remove it because it's not doing anything anyways. Right? So, and if you really want to know what the difference is, then if you see, over here, I increase the count before I assign it, right? I increase the count and then I assign it. But the one that we had before, we assign the count before we increase it. So you come here, count is 0. You haven't changed it. You just assign it, whatever it is, and then you increase it. So that little difference, you can see how drastically it is changing the output. And that is what computer programming there is. So they say there is a bug in the code. If they say there's a bug in the code, sometimes they want you to put this, say this one, you have put the code here, but what you should really do is to put it down here. And once you do that, it's gonna fix a bug. It's gonna stop the whole software from malfunctioning. Okay. So that is how coding is. Did you guys learn something through this exercise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Jeffrey, how's it going? Is Jeffrey here? And if you are saying something, you are muted. Okay, so do you have any more questions before we end the scope? I'm gonna end the recording as well, and then we can do something else.
No.
Okay, so how many types of scopes do we have? Global scope, and then we have the function scope and the
Function.
block. Yeah, function and then the block. This is actually true for all languages, I think. Pretty much all languages. So if you have an if statement, that is also a block. So it's a block scope. So that's it. And I do have examples on the side here. You can go through them. Oh, let's talk about nested scope. I think it's important. Nested means that you have multiple scopes nested within one another. And if you look at this function, I will just show you because it's easy to understand. There is a bigger function, and within it, you have another function in there. So this variable you created out here, you created this variable within the bigger function, but you can access it within the inner function because both of them are in the same place. Right? They are both in the same place. But if you create this variable inside the inner function, you will not be able to access it out here because this is a new scope. So that is the technique, and you can just experiment with this out there. And then of course, this is what are they doing here? This is the global scope, global, and they're trying to print the content of a variable that is defined inside a function scope. It's not possible. It's not possible. So there will be an error. So the scope chain, I talked about it. Like if you are trying to call a variable here, the computer is going to look within that scope. If it doesn't find that variable, it's going to look outside that scope to see if it is there. Like if there is a global scope somewhere that the variable exists. If it's not there, then it's going to throw an error like that. So, so the global scope is available to everybody inside, the smaller scopes. So it's like if you have a bracket, a bracket, you always want to evaluate the bracket first. So you have 2 plus 5 plus, and then you have another bracket here says 4 times 2. You see? And you may even have another bracket in here plus say, so say 2, 4 plus 1. Like if you have to evaluate this math, you always start from the inner bracket, Once you finish the inner bracket, you go to the one out the next one, and then you do the other one. So that's the way it works. It will look in here for the variable. If it doesn't find it, it's going to go outside of it and check the global scope. That's all I'm saying. And sometimes you can have this inside a function. It's possible. It's just a block. You can have a block inside a function. So this indentation is bad. Just indent it properly. Okay. So what is indentation? You are writing the code in such a way that is readable, right? That's indentation. So now you can see there is a scope. I have put one scope inside another scope. So if I'm looking for a variable here and it's not there, it's going to look outside here to find it. Because today's scope right now, this is acting like a global scope. Everything here can be accessible in it. And in that order. But if I define a variable here, you cannot access it out here. Because remember, this one is creating a scope. It's creating a wall. It's protecting that variable. So you cannot go from the top down, but you can go from the bottom up. From the inside out, it's always okay, but from the outside in, it doesn't work. That's the whole thing about scopes. And Please, tomorrow, if somebody asks you, do you understand the scope of a variable, the scope of a function? Don't be scared. Just look for blocks and look for functions. And then if you can't find a block, you can't find a function, then you are within the global scope. That's all there is. Okay. Okay. Yes. So that is the last topic we had to look at. Now there is a practice question here. Building a game in JavaScript. Do you guys want to practice this at home? You can just copy this and paste it in a script and see what it does. Yeah, I have the code, just copy and execute it, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop the recording here, then we can do something else.